What's up everyone, welcome back to my channel Reef RX. Today I'm going to show you my saltwater mixing station. I'm going to tell you how much it costs to build it and show you everything you need to know. Let's get started. So for those of you that are new to reefing, you're probably wondering, what is a mixing station and do I need a setup that looks like this? So a mixing station is where you take your plain water, which is usually RODI or distilled water, and you mix it into salt water that's suitable for your aquarium. But no, you don't need a setup like this. There's plenty of setups out. As a matter of fact, most people don't have a setup like this. A lot of people use brute barrels, which I did for many years, and then some people just use 5-gallon buckets. 5-gallon buckets work great, especially if you have a smaller tank and you don't need to make a lot of water. Brute barrels are another very popular option because it's easy to get a hold of barrels. You can buy them at your local hardware store, and they hold the water that you need, and you can have a nice setup. I even have brute barrels that were on wheels up until I upgraded here. So a setup like this is a little bit, it's definitely more money. We're going to talk about how much that costs in just a little bit here. But it's more complex, but it's easier to make water. It's often, I'll say, less maintenance. It takes up less real estate. As you can see, I have this on a stand and I don't have barrels everywhere. So it's a nice setup. It's easy to use, and I'm going to show you how to use all this and what everything does. And there's a bunch of valves here. As a matter of fact, I have 9 ball valves on this unit right here, but every single one serves a purpose. So why don't we walk through what this unit does and how it operates. So I'm going to do the best I can to explain how all this stuff works, but if I forget something or you have a question or comment, please be sure to leave it in the comments. And while you're at it, let's give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm for me. So I have the 2 tanks here. I got the RODI tank, I got the saltwater tank. Both of these tanks are isolated down here by a ball valve. So the ball valve can be open to allow the water to flow out of the tank, or it can be shut off to isolate it. On each end of this pipe in the front, I have a 90-degree fitting there attached to a ball valve, which allows you to take a 5-gallon bucket, put it right under that 90-degree, and allow water to freely flow down there by gravity with no pump. So I made sure when I built this stand that it had the height. The height was high enough to be able to put the bucket under there. So if I wanted to fill up the saltwater tank, I have to use this pump to fill it up with RODI water. So what I do is I open the valves here. So open this valve in the bottom. I'll open the valve going to the pump, and then I'll open the valve above the pump and ensure all other valves will remain shut. I will plug in the pump or turn the pump on. It will soon be connected to a controller system, and then it'll transfer water from this tank into this tank. The one thing you got to be careful for is if you're not paying attention, you will overflow this tank. This pump will not stop unless you stop it. So the other cool thing I have on this system is 2 accessories. So my first accessory is this hose. It is just a Python hose that I use. And it's connected to this valve here, so I can turn this on. And the neat part about this is I can use this for either RODI water or I can use it for salt water. It all depends on how I have the valves hooked up. So this is really comes in handy to fill my ATO container, or if I'm doing a water change and I want to add salt water into the tank. This is it right here. So the second accessory I have is this 1/2-inch push to connect connected to this valve. So where this comes in handy is if I wanted to run media in my tank and I'm replacing media or adding new media that needs to be rinsed out. So I can put my 1/2-inch push to connect here. I can either run salt water or RODI. Again, it's all configurable of how I have the valves. And I can flush that media before actually connecting it to my tank. So this is great to have, and then this hose is a lifesaver. So I've got to have them both. So from there, the way this works here is if I wanted to mix salt water, I would shut all these other valves off, open up the saltwater tank valve. I would open up the valve to the pump and open up the valve above the pump. And then what it'll do is it'll pull water from the saltwater tank. It'll pump it up and down. And then inside this tank, there is a pipe that goes down to about the 15-gallon mark with the 45-degree fitting on it. It'll just circulate the water in this tank, which will help mix your salt when you add the salt. So it does a really good job at mixing together, and I don't really need any other pumps in this tank, so it works great. So that is the basic overview of all the plumbing here. The other cool feature I have is in the back. Let me show you. So back in here, I have a bulkhead where this allows you to run wires into this tank. So I have a heater in here and I have a temperature probe. So having this bulkhead is very helpful. Now, if you're trying to build your own unit, make sure you have a lot of unions and ball valves, because this will really make it easy for yourself, especially if you need to take containers out or if you need to change out a pump. It'll make your life a lot easier and you won't have to redo any plumbing. So one question I get asked quite a bit is, how do I clean these containers? Well, the RODI unit rarely ever needs cleaning. It doesn't get any residue buildup. However, my salt container can get some residue buildup. One thing I am going to do to help with the residue buildup is I'm going to add a sediment filter onto the saltwater tank. So as it pumps through, it'll go through a sediment filter and help take some of those particles out. But you're still probably going to need to clean this container. So the best way to do it is I disconnect it, I bring this right outside, and I pressure wash it. I stick my hose in the middle, and I'm able to clean the inside of the tank really well. It's super easy, and it's really not as much work as it sounds. Now again, if you're building this on your own, you don't need to use these barrels. So these barrels can kind of add up in price, especially depending on what size barrels that you need for your setup. So you can do this with brute barrels. I've seen plenty of folks use brute containers or brute barrels, and it's worked just fine. So there's a lot of options out there. The plumbing setup, you can do as little or as much as you want. It just really all depends on your needs. Like a lot may not do this 1/2-inch push to connect here because it might not be needed for them to clean out media, but for me it was. And a lot of folks might not use that hose. It might not be necessary for them to have a hose like that. But again, for me, it makes it easy to have a long hose connected. So the thing you guys are all probably wondering is, how much has this cost, or how much would it cost to build this exact setup? I got the breakdown right here for you. So for my cost, I included everything. So for plumbing, for everything that you see here, you're probably looking around like $130, $140 or so. Again, it depends. If these ball valves are about 30 bucks a piece. So I have 9. So if you don't see a need for 9, then you really save a lot on the cost there, because those can add up pretty quickly. A question you might also ask is, what size plumbing do I have? This is all 1-inch plumbing, with the exception of this piece right here. And you're probably wondering, well, why did you reduce this? For all this blue plumbing that you see, the blue PVC, that was a different setup that I had on my Reef tank, and I don't think I'm going to use the same setup. So instead of just buying new stuff, I just made use with what I had. So again, plumbing, you're about 130, maybe 150, more or less. It really depends on your needs. For these storage tanks, so for some of you, this might be your biggest cost. So these tanks are $280 a piece. And then with shipping, you're probably looking at anywhere from $600, $700 for these tanks. And then the pump that I have here, this pump is, like I said, it's about, I think it's a 1,600 gallon an hour pump, and the pump was $230. The lumber for the stand down here, I just built this out of lumber, made sure it's secure. This is roughly 1,000+ pounds that it's holding when the tanks are at max capacity. So you want to make sure whatever type of stand you have is really suitable to hold that kind of weight. So for the lumber, I would say it probably cost me around $50. So all in, to build something like this, roughly $1,100. And again, you could really cut that cost in half. Use less ball valves. Use brute containers. Make it easy for yourself. Or maybe you don't need it on the ground because you don't need these 5-gallon bucket fills. Then you wouldn't need to build a stand. You could put this directly on the ground. Just like your tank though, make sure wherever you're putting it can support any kind of weight that's going to be of your size. I mean, 1,000 pounds really isn't too much, but if you're having massive sized tanks, you're going to want to make sure the floor can hold that kind of weight. So $1,100, this makes my life super easy, and it actually makes me want to do water changes because it's so easy now. So if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. I would appreciate if you could give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time.